will be available. Okay, first of all, we're going to do this for 45 minutes and then we'll reserve 15 minutes specifically for any Q&A. So I'm going to start my timer to keep us on track. So my name is Jill Stott, and I am a senior Agile trainer and Agile coach for Next Step Solutions. I've been working here for a couple of years. We are based in Arlington, and my colleague, now I need to find your picture, Danny. Where'd you go? Is Danny Junot. I can never say your name. I've only worked with you for 2 years. You think
it's okay. It's fun to find out the different variations, but yes, I'm Danny Junot is how I say it most of the time. But happy to have you with us. Like we were saying, lots of familiar names here, and welcome to some of the newcomers. I'm the training client operations specialist at Next Step Solutions, working in the training unit. But I am also an IC Agile instructor and the co-trainer for Next Step Solutions Agile Team Facilitation course that Jill and I teach together. So happy to have you all with us today.
All right, fantastic. So thank you. So as we go along, please don't hesitate to just jump in, ask a question if you'd like to. Also, you can use the chat for any comments that you have. We'd love to have these a little bit more interactive than maybe some webinars are used to. If you don't want to participate, that's okay too. I know some people, it's lunch and I just want to like kick back and watch the show and eat popcorn. Either way, we're really happy to have you all here. All right, so let's get this party started. We're talking about our Scrum Master Facilitation Toolkit. So a lot of time when I was a Scrum Master, it's like, hey, Jill, do you want to be Scrum Master? Sure. No training, no prior experience, and not really leveraging the concept of facilitation. Such an amazing thing that can change really the dynamics of the group and help you achieve better decisions, solve problems in more creative ways, and come up with really cool ideas. So a little bit about Next Step Solutions. We provide Agile training, and we have these free webinars once a month. So please join us again. You'll get some emails about when those are coming up. So we have our Scrum Alliance classes here that I'm pointing to, and then we also teach common classes, private classes for Scaled Agile DevOps, and our IC Agile classes. In fact, Danny, what do we have scheduled for next week?
Yes, actually, Jill, thank you for bringing it up. On July 20th and 21st, we will be, yours truly and Jill Stott will be delivering our first Agile Team Facilitation course publicly. So feel free to, I'll post a link in the chat, so feel free to click and check out our upcoming courses and register for any that you're in all that you're interested in.
Thank you, sir. All right, and since my boss is on, we also do coaching. So if you're interested in coaching, please reach out. We have amazing coaches and we'd love to work with you more. Okay, there's that. All right, here's our agenda. We like to start our meetings with a nice agenda so it's a clear understanding of why we're here and what the goal is of the next 45 minutes. So here's our goal here. I did a little picture of a goal where the goal is to make your meetings better using some different techniques, some tools and tips to help people come together and really not waste time. How's that? It's today, obviously. So ideally, you'd send your agenda earlier. We're going to go from 12 to 1, and then the world was invited. And I think we have the best people in the world, if I'm not mistaken, in this call right now. And I'll be facilitating, and I don't think we'll need to take any notes. And then Danny will be, he just likes to chime in once in a while. And then here's our agenda. We'll go through the intro, which we're doing now. We really want to understand the problem. We'll talk about the concept of neutrality. And then we'll talk about agendas a little bit more in detail, icebreakers. Boy, I have a full plate. And then full participation, how to get people to start talking and start everybody collaborating and gaining consensus, coming up with a final decision that meets everybody's needs and it's the best decision, and then closing out your meeting. Okay.
Jill, I'd like to commend you, Jill, on utilizing this format of presenting the agenda in your window right there, so we can all visualize it and see what we're in for the next hour. I think that's a great tool in and of itself to facilitate this meeting.
Absolutely. So Okay, so I just was looking at the chat. Oh, I'm not sharing a screen. So if you look at my, if you look at my little video, I guess we call it video, that's where I'm sharing my, this, what do they call it? The online flip chart, if you will. Can you see that now? I've got Tammy and Anne.
Yeah, and if you, so Jill has spotlighted herself, but if you select Jill or hover over her name on your Zoom, you can select to pin her, and by pinning her, you will be able to see her.
Danny, I think you're also like pinned.
Yeah, I pinned you as well. Is it too small?
So yeah, it's too small with Danny too. So
okay, how's this? I'm going to remove you, buddy, but we still want to hear your voice.
It's okay. Okay.
All right.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, this is a new tool. I just discovered it last week. So, oh, I'm frozen. So it might be a delay here in some of the video as we go back and forth. So let me know if there's any other issues that we can. Oh, so you're on the phone, you can't see. Oh, that's interesting. All right. Well, a lot of these, the slides, this is really small to see, but most of them are just a picture. So it won't make much difference, to be honest.
It does flag an interesting thing that Jill will talk about too, is that, you know, part of the facilitation and bringing in different tools is being prepared for different experiences, especially in the virtual world, how folks might be coming in using different formats or different levels of technology, i.e. a phone, a cell phone, a tablet, or a personal computer. So being able to adapt and try different things or adapt the meeting itself.
Absolutely. Okay, so Danny, I just turned off my screen share for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny, would you mind running us through that?
Yeah. So great. So Jill and I, when we run our webinars, we do like, you know, for those who are interested and willing to participate, to really just to have an icebreaker, to get involved and just learn a little bit about each other and the folks that are here. And it's a great way to actually bring it into some of your meetings as well. So this is a virtual version of something we'd like to do now. Again, given the technology restrictions that some of you might have if you're on a phone or not on your computer, you know, you might not be able to do this, or apologies, but for those of you that can, if you're in your Zoom window, a fun thing to do, you could go to your reactions button. So if you have one of the latest versions of Zoom, you can go to the reactions, which will be along the bottom of your Zoom window. Or if you don't have an updated version, you can click on your participants window and you should see reactions below the list of names. But by clicking that, you should see a series of emojis, and there is an activity icon that looks like a basketball. So the prompt here for everyone is to click on the basketball, and you'll see a series of sports. There's other extracurricular activities like art or filmmaking or singing. So the idea here is to a fun thought exercise of, if you could be the world's greatest of anything, what would it be? So you're going to use those icons to select. Normally, if you're in a smaller group, it's nice to say, what would you be and why? And usually that's, you know, fun and gets to reveal some things about ourselves. But in the context of a large group like this is just a fun. Brian would be a party goer, which is great. And I see you're saying no basketball, so it could be you might have an older version of Zoom, which is okay. Apologies that you can't participate in this one. Let's see, I saw a rocket ship from G. You're welcome to also drop it in the chat as well if you don't have that reaction button. So would you like to be the world's greatest violinist, or perhaps you want to be the world's greatest? It could be, you know, a position player on a team sport. It could be a solo sport. Milika, I see you're on the mobile, so maybe you'd like the world's best conversationalist. We could say that, which really is a pretty awesome goal. There you go. And so let's see. I, for instance, select the football because I'm not actually a big football fan, but personally, I would love the thought of being invincible as a running back. Just to be able to go, just give me the ball, I'll go. And so, yeah, so for me, but yeah, things like that, being able to use a tool that you're experiencing your meetings with, let a tool work for you is a great way to get things going. Cricketer, Sumesh. Thank you, Sumesh. Yeah.
And trauma doctor. Whoa, Ramya, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So that's an example of a really, really, really short icebreaker that you could share with your teams as you start any one of your meetings. Even if it was a short stand-up meeting, you would still have ample time to get through everything. So, and if you can't see this, this is okay. So set the rules of the game. So for this webinar, hey, if you want to talk, sometimes you can just speak up, but sometimes people collide and it gets really awkward. It's like, oh, no, you go next. No, you go next. Ah! And then nobody wants to talk anymore. So maybe you set up rules. Well, hey, just click the raise your hand icon, think reaction, and then we'll go ahead and invite you to talk. If somebody starts going off on a tangent, maybe you have this rules in your group that says, hey, rather than saying, oh, you're going in a rat hole, which is kind of rude sometimes to interrupt people, maybe you could have a little icon pop up and say, hey, if I do the car, it means, well, let's put this in a parking lot and talk about it later because it's off topic. And then here's this third one here that I have. It's a thumbs up sign if you can't see it. So I have been guilty of doing this too, where a person might be talking and they keep re-explaining, and they're talking about the same thing, but they just keep circling around and around and around. And so you've probably heard the term Elmo, enough, let's move on. Some people would say that, but I always thought that was kind of rude, and I hate interrupting people. So maybe an idea is, hey, we get it, Jill, then you just flash the thumbs up or some other symbol that you agree on within your group. Say, hey, when I'm stuck in a circle, I'm in a loop, just say, hey, you're good, we got it, thanks, buddy, you can stop talking now. So again, use the tools. I don't think we use, and I don't either, use these little online tricks and tools that we have. Thanks, Brian. He's like, shit it.
And actually, and Jill, real quick, speaking of tools, we did have a comment in the chat from Maru who says, I love the visible timer on your cam screen, which is something that Jill just brought for this. And so I think the reinforcement's great. And it is valuable to see how much, for folks to know how much time they have. Yeah,
absolutely. Because you forget. It's like, oh my goodness, the meeting's over and we didn't even really get started. Absolutely. And so you can use a timer like this. You could also use share your screen. There's tons of online timers if you're not co-located. Otherwise, having a timer visible, if you were lucky to be in the office, it would be a fantastic way to keep everyone on track. All right, causes of bad Scrum meetings. So let's talk about some problems that could occur that will prevent you from having an effective meeting. What we're going to do for this is we're going to use a tool called Mural, and some of you may be familiar with it. We're going to try to keep this as simple as possible. And I'm going to share the link here in the chat if you would like to join us. Copy link. So go ahead and click on that link, and then you'll be taken to an online whiteboard. If you can't access that, please put your items in the chat. All right.
For anybody as you're joining, just select enter as a visitor. There's no need to have an account or create an account if you don't already. You can just enter as a visitor. It's no problem.
Yes, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do here, I'm going to actually share my screen now, so those of you who can't access this can see it. Okay, so what we're going to do is just, hey, if you double click on that white piece of paper, you're going to just put little notes in and you can type in them directly that says, hey, what are some things that make a bad meeting? What are things that just either drive you crazy or prevent you from doing what you need to do, whatever the goal is of that meeting? Go ahead and plop them in there. I'm going to summon everybody. Boop.
Yeah, and again, as Jill mentioned, if you're not able to access the virtual whiteboard, feel free to put any thoughts in the chat. We'll also monitor that as well. So we see a few things: no agenda or goal, boring. Jill, keep that in mind. Lack of participation. Lack of participation. Lots of input here.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes
Distractions from outside the meeting. Yep. And actually, it's interesting that some of the examples are sort of more business related. So distractions outside of the meeting, chat, email, etc., sort of maybe split attention. We have one in the chat here from G. People not being ready to report on what they are doing properly. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good point.
So yeah, sort of like fake up, sort of faux updates, just a little bit of fluff. Silent participants as well can hinder a meeting. Sorry, Joe, I'm very good at reading. So that's why I'm reading out loud.
I'm impressed. I love it. No, thank you. Because I'm kind of moving these around so they're not jumped on top of each other. Okay, no time boxes. Death by marketing. What is that? Misleading. You get one thing promised, and when you come, you sit there for 9 minutes. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. I want to know exactly what I'm in for, or I'm not going to come.
And here's a great one too, Jill, that we'll actually touch on a little bit as part of this webinar, which is the awkward silence, no assigned agenda, but then specifically no meeting leader. So having a clear meeting leader is really key, and not having one certainly can be a problem.
This is a great group. This is a great brainstorming list. Again, another technique that you can use to solicit more input when you're having a conversation. I'm going to go ahead and click stop share and go back to my mini. I didn't know that Miro is very well. Oh, awesome. I haven't used Miro on the phone before, so that's good to know. Thank you, Miro, for sharing that. All right, so.
Could you, Mama?
I'm sorry, what was that? All right, so this is just a picture. You don't need to worry about the slide. Cost, this is a discussion, costs of a bad meeting. So talking about, hey, I read somewhere, I don't know if it's accurate, but there's over 11 million meetings around the world every single day. Huge number of meetings, and how many of those are actually useful, that people are getting something out of it. When I teach my lean concepts, a lot of times I'll say, okay, everybody, we're going to list out wastes, things that you do during your workday that don't add any value and they're not required. And almost always the biggest one I hear from people is meetings, sitting in meetings that are not productive, or I don't need to be there. The cost is huge. If you think about it, you're getting paid to sit in a meeting. Knowledge workers are. You're getting paid either way. And if it's a waste of an hour, you could have 7 people, if it's your Scrum call, for example, that just got paid to do something that was a complete waste of time when they could have been doing something that's adding value. So there's a real cost to it. So you want to keep that in mind when you're scheduling and just preparing meetings. And the key is having a strong facilitator to design the meeting so it is effective, and then making sure as we go through, we're meeting the goals of that intended meeting. All right. So any other thoughts on costs of a bad meeting? And also, I answer my own question. Bad morale. People are just like, it's draining. Like, oh, I don't want to go to that meeting again. So something to be cognizant of. It's really important. All right, so we have, what are we going to do about these bad meetings? First of all, we've identified some symptoms of a bad meeting, a lot of great lists. Now, using a good facilitator, learning these little tricks and tips really can make a huge difference. So I've written down here some of our Scrum events that are really important for the Scrum Master to really make sure they happen, for one. And then rather than the Scrum Master doing all the talking, getting everybody else to step up and self-organize is really important to that position. All right, so what does the facilitator supposed to do? So sometimes people think, oh, the facilitator, they set up the meeting, they invite everybody, and they hold the space. But it's a lot bigger than that. There's a lot more to it. There's like super long trainings you can go to get certified as a facilitator, really intensive. So your goal is to conduct, right? You do initiate, you start it, you kind of set the stage. And then you're more of a coach. So there's conduct, coach, and catalyze. So you're coaching the team along the way, asking powerful questions to pull out new ideas and to make sure people are collaborating. They're not just talking at each other, which a lot of times happens. And you kind of taking a step back and you're reading the room, right? You're not paying attention to necessarily exactly what the decisions are. You're helping them come to a collaborative decision. And then catalyze, right? You're gonna one that's gonna start the fire, keep things moving. Hey, we're bored, and people are unengaged. They're looking around, they have their heads on their tables. You're kind of a prompt there to nudge people to, hey, let's pay attention. Here's the goal. Let's keep things directed to what we're trying to do in the first place rather than getting off onto tangents. The concept of neutrality. So this is interesting too. I learned this a few years ago and I wish I had known it sooner. As a Scrum Master, I was always like, well, I have an opinion on everything. And this is what I think we should do. What we really want in most cases, there'll be some cases where you might have skin in the game, but you are a neutral observer, right? Where you don't pick a side. So let's suppose you're having a friendly discussion over doing X versus Y. Rather than you taking a side, you're going to just say, hey, all of these points are valid. I just want to make sure that this group together they share each other's perspectives. There's good communication, collaboration, and then they work to come up with the best solution. It could be a combination of both. It could be a compromise. It's a lot of different things we can do here. And then I have these horses here. Why did I put the horses here? If you can see this little screenshot. Because you don't have a horse in the race. Is that the saying, Brian? You don't have a horse in this race. So it's so easy to, especially when you work for that company, to get invested. Well, this is my perspective, but you need to be pulling back and just being the facilitator, not necessarily a participant. All right, any questions on neutrality? And this is a big one for me, and tell me what you think about this. So social interactions is so important to building that fabric, that social fabric of your Scrum team that is so vital to being open with each other, being transparent, being comfortable, being vulnerable, having that atmosphere of psychological safety. If that's not there, a lot of the meetings that we have, our stand-up meetings particularly, become just a status meeting, right? And we're not really digging into like, here's the real problem. Here's how I feel about this. Okay, now we have some meat and we can really make changes for the better if we can be open with each other. So I like to use a lot of social interactions. Really, they can be short games, for example, are great. I know that a lot of people like, if you go out on the internet and just type in Scrum games, there's tons of stuff on there. I was going to list some specific things out, but there's so much out there. It's better if you just search it on your own. Also, mixing things up a little bit, like especially trying to get people to turn their cameras on is always a challenge. So a couple things you can do to help that is, for example, use your cameras in ways that, or ask questions that requires the camera to be on. For example, one thing I like to do is show and tell. So maybe before the meeting say, hey, if you have some kind of cool object that you love, come to the meeting at the beginning and you each are gonna show, like, this is my favorite sticky note and it has great meaning to it, like we did when we were little kids. And then people start to be more comfortable just with something so simple. Pet parade is one of my favorites. Hey, let's all show our pets. Or if you don't have a pet, you could use your kid maybe. Or if you don't have a kid, you could just use a stuffed animal. It's really fun and helps break the ice. Does anyone have other ideas for ways to build social interactions within our Scrum meetings? Okay, also I have this witty banter. So Brian, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say, just talking to each other, sharing personal life details that you're a real person, things that are going on in your life.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. So I like to start when I'm facilitating a meeting, I call it the first 3 minutes, I call it witty banter, where we just chit chat. It's just like, hey, what are you up to? What are your favorite movies? things like that. There's tons of different icebreakers that you can use. If you go on to Google, type in icebreakers, it's super fun. I start each one of my trainings with a simple icebreaker. For example, okay, if you were an animal, what animal would you be and why? And it gets people more inclined to take themselves off mute. And studies have shown that if people talk at the beginning of a meeting, they're more likely to continue to engage. Yes, I love that. In essence, mini teasers. Ooh, I like that. Just little riddles, games that could take just a couple of minutes from Maru, and then just talk to each other, right? Like if you were in the office, that's so weird when you're online, because if we're in the office, it's always like, hey, Jennifer, oh, you look great. I love your dress, blah, blah, blah. But we don't tend to do that online because it becomes so cold and I don't know. Old as a cat, absolutely. Great ideas. Jokes, quotes. I used to have a Scrum Master and he would start every one of our stand-ups with a joke or a quote he would just look up right before the meeting. And it might be fun to have the different people on your team say, hey, we're going to do a little social interaction at the beginning of each meeting, or maybe it's a longer meeting like a retrospective. It could be somewhere in the middle to give people a break. And then kind of pass that opportunity around to different people to come up with new ideas rather than just having the Scrum Master do it each time. All right, so next we have time management. We've already talked about this. So really, that's one of the responsibilities of a good facilitator is keeping people on track within the time box. So here I have just the visible clock, which is nice, and they don't have to talk much to it. It's also if I realize, oh, I've got 18 minutes left. Okay, everybody, so we've got 18 minutes left, and this is what we still need to cover. So let's focus and kind of keeping people aligned within that time box itself. There's nothing, I was going to say there's nothing worse than having your meeting go overtime, but I'm sure there's a lot worse things in life. But it's very not cool. Like if you're there, like I was planning to be done in an hour, and this is just going on and on and on. When that happens, it was either a case of poor time management, or you just had more stuff that didn't fit into the time box. So you want to schedule a new meeting instead of just dragging that one on longer. Agendas. Okay, I get so lazy sometimes with doing agendas. I always have well-meaning. It's so important, even with the simplest of meetings that you have with your Scrum teams, or even meetings that you may be conducting outside of your Scrum teams. Be sure to do your pre-planning, where I'm going to set up an agenda. I'm going to say, here's the goal, here's the purpose, this is what's in it for you, here's why we're having this meeting. And then when I send that out, they say about, if you can, 5 days before the meeting starts, or at least a couple of days, so people can wrap their minds around and start thinking about, okay, we're going to have our retrospective, and here's some things that we want to focus on. I'm going to think about that. So when I jump into the meeting, I'm all ready to start sharing. Also, when I had, what was I think I was a tester at the time. I had a Scrum Master who noticed that we would get in our backlog refinement meetings with our product owner, and they would go on for, I not kid you not, for hours and hours and hours. And a lot of us, we didn't know what things were coming in the pipeline. So our Scrum Master would create an agenda, say, just really high level, here are the 5 different things in our backlog that we're going to talk about to flesh them out. And then if there's some technical stuff you need to do research on and think about that, then you're prepared when you come to backlog refinement. They won't last for hours and will be more productive in that meeting. So agendas are really important, and we don't want to just have a meeting to have a meeting, right? That's really frustrating for a lot of people. So think about that. There's tons of different templates you can use, and just depending on the nature of your meeting. If you are facilitating, say, a 2-day workshop, you would have a very long agenda potentially, and you would want to get that out sooner. If it's a stand-up, maybe it's just a couple of words. Hey, remember, this is the purpose of this stand-up meeting. It's not a status report. It's to get a plan. How are we going to meet our sprint goal today? What are we going to do as a team? All right, I've noticed a couple people put, some people don't participate. It's just like crickets. I ask a question and it's silence. How do I get people engaged and talking? And for those who aren't. Now, there's a couple of different ideas I have. If you have other ideas, please plop them in the chat or just raise your hand and let us know. One here is divide into smaller groups. So let's suppose you're facilitating a larger group and maybe there's 10 people in it. It's not a huge group. Some people are more reluctant to speak up when I have 10 people in a meeting, and they might feel more comfortable with smaller groups. So again, don't be afraid to use those breakout rooms in Zoom or Teams, whatever online tool that you use if you're meeting online. Also, if you're co-located, you can just kind of separate into different rooms potentially. Let's say, hey, we're doing a retrospective, so we're going to divide out, talk to each other in smaller groups, and then come back together and find the commonalities and then get this list together. Hey, here's what we want to do different. And then there's in the chat from, I hope I'm saying your name right, Maru, my personal philosophy is stoicism regarding other people in general, and especially meeting engagement. What do you mean by that? I had a therapist once tell me I'm really stoic. I'm like, I don't know if that was a compliment or not.
You mean you want me to explain it?
What you mean by that? What? I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, in general, I mean, I treat people as self-responsible beings. That means if they see something good about something or they understand what other people are saying or not, that's their problem, not mine, to make sure that they get it. They're not children. That means they don't see the value in engagement, and it's their 10th meeting. It's their responsibility. They might have 10,000 different reasons why they're not engaging, but if they're not engaging just because they don't see the value or they're not trying to see the value, it's their problem. I'm not going to do that, because if I do that, I'm going to be dead after 10 years. I'm not going to work ever again, ever. I'm going to be having a meeting burnout. That's why.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, thank you. Great point. So there's a point where, hey, you could be the best facilitator in the world and you set it up for all these active and games and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we need to have that personal responsibility, right? Hey, you're an adult, just like Maria told us, and we expect you to engage meaningfully. And if you're not, you're really not doing your job to your greatest. So thank you for that. These meeting agreements, hey, here's what we expect from each one. Our rule is we have our cameras on. That's the rule. But maybe there's some exceptions. Certain things like that, and you make your team meeting agreements. And then as a Scrum Master, you don't show those. It just means just, hey, here's a reminder. Here's what we agree to collectively. And then, yes, and Brian says in the chat, talking isn't the only form of participation. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So I know when I do webinars, some people are a lot more comfortable putting things in the chat. So pay attention to your chat. It takes some time when you're facilitating because you're trying to do 5 different things online at the same time. And then if you're, oh, sorry, there is some background noise. If you can mute your line, if you have some background noise, that would be fantastic. My colleague Danny had to step off, so I am here alone. All right. Okay, next we have some questions. So a facilitator to keep the conversation going, to really help people come up with creative ideas. Questions are your best friend. So we talk about this a lot in coaching classes. The idea is to ask, very open-ended questions. Can't tell whose that is. I'm gonna, just a second, I'm gonna unpin myself and mute them really quick. Okay, of course now it's all quiet. Oh, it's Hari, buddy. Okay, there we go. There we go. And okay. About this, okay. So questions. So there's kind of 4 different categories of questions that you can leverage. I use the ORID or ORID. So the first one's objectives. So, and a lot of times we're just trying to understand the data. We're just getting the data out. Hey, so when we're sharing the data, you're kind of helping people clarify, say, hey, what stands out? What are we seeing here? What do these patterns mean? What else is there? I was like, what else? What else? What else? To kind of make sure we've gotten everything we can think of. And then also in the objective, always start with what is the problem we're trying to solve? A lot of times we jump into solutioning, but we don't actually know what the problem is. So you want to make sure we've clarified the problem and you're just asking those questions. And then we have reflective, just kind of getting an emotional component. So it's kind of like, and I know this sounds really real, but how does that make you feel? You know, when you're having those retrospectives, retrospectives are the wheelhouse of the Scrum Master. That's where you can really, really shine and help the team make huge advances as far as improvement goes. So if they're talking about some kind of roadblock, like, how does that make you feel? Oh, I'm so frustrated. Now we've engaged another sense, which really helps each person say, oh yeah, me too. Oh my goodness, this is an issue. What can we do about it? They feel more engaged. What makes you happy? What surprised you? Things like that. Did this surprise you? What worries you? Kind of engage that other component rather than just the cerebral. And then we have interpretive. So, okay, we've got this data. We're emotionally connected to it, this conversation that we're having. What does this mean? What could we do different if we could do it all over again? Now we're starting to kind of pinpoint some solutions. You're not, as a facilitator, giving them the solutions. You're just prompting them and nudging them, helping them to come up with it on their own. And then you get to the final, the decisional, right? So we get towards the end of the meeting. Hey, well, what are we going to actually do? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to start doing? What are we continue doing? What are the next steps? And that's where a good facilitator will write those down in an action items. It might be part of your backlog, but you want to make sure that's visible, and then you follow up with that to make sure it's not just we're talking and then we never actually make any progress because we were having the same conversation over and over again. And then this last little picture here, if you can see that, it's just sometimes you just got to mix it up. You got to mix things up. Look around, there's so many different tools you can use to get people to participate, right? We have our collaborative whiteboards. There are the chat, use the chat. There are annotations you can use in Zoom or Teams, or people can draw pictures and things like that. Don't be afraid just to try things out and be really creative and just see if we can pivot and, get some fresh ideas. There's so many different retrospective tools that it can be different every single time. Show pictures, memes, and videos and get people engaged. All right, any other fun ideas for increasing participation? Please share those with us. All right, we're getting towards the end here. It looks like we've got 7 minutes left. So now we're going to talk about some different ways to get the team to come to a decision that's collaborative, right? It's not just, well, the CEO said we're going to do this, so we're going to do that. That kind of defeats the purpose of even having a meeting, right? So one of the things you could do in your team working agreements, I always do this because it's like a piece of paper, is decide, have a team decision-making protocol. Decide how, in the most parts, you're going to come to a decision. Is it going to be majority rules? Is it going to be by rank? Is it going to be consensus? Are we going to combine things together? Just kind of call that out and understand, hey, when we were going to make a decision, how are we going to do that? So it isn't just the loudest voice in the room saying, we're going to do this. We want to make sure that we get all the feedback. So one cool tool, we're going to go back to our nice little mural board. If you're still in that, go ahead and open it back up. And I'm going to show you if you haven't used this before. Okay, there I'm seeing. I'm going to summon you. Summon. So a couple of things here. In fact, I'll share my screen if you don't have access. So you have everyone brainstorm, or they call this brain writing, where they're actually putting things on these little sticky notes. And you're saying, okay, well, let's see. Maybe we're decided we want to tackle what we consider the biggest challenge, or maybe the low-hanging fruit when it comes to bad meetings. So you can do a couple of things here. So I have all these things out here, and you can do affinity mapping, where the facilitator can then, okay, let me group things that are similar together. So let's see, lack of participation, over participation. Hey, those are kind of the two sides of the same coin. Rambling, endless speakers without no decision making. Absolutely. Or you can also do, I can't remember what they call it, where it's like a silent affinity mapping. So what you do, you empower the team, say, okay, everybody, we're just going to not talk, and you're going to go into this mural board, if that's what you're using, and you just silently, you drag what you think tickets belong in groups together. Go ahead and do that. So just try that. Say, oh, this goes with this. If you were in the office, you could just use sticky notes on a wall, and then the team just like, okay, these go together, and so forth. All right. So once you've moved these in to groups, and then what you could do, dot voting. Who's familiar with dot voting? Classic facilitator tool. If you're in a room, you could give everybody, okay, you're going to put a dot, you get 3 dots, for example, on the items that you think are the biggest problem to bad meetings, the biggest symptom, I should say. And then it's kind of, hey, now I've figured out with this got the most number of dots. So that's what we're going to go with. In Mural, we have a little voting option that I've been using. Super fun. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. So how that works, I'm going to start the voting session. You can see my screen. I'll give each one of you 3 votes. And any member, next. I'm going to go ahead and start the voting. And you should be able to go ahead and click which items you want to vote for. I'm just randomly clicking, and then go ahead and do that. Just click on the sticky notes that you think, yeah, this is the biggest pain point when it comes to bad meetings. And notice also in a lot of these, you have a little clock. You can set a timer, say, hey, you've got 1 minute to vote. Boom. Which is another good way to manage our time. And then also, if I'm doing Mural, if I don't want to do that, I can say, hey, just get a little picture, an icon, and plop it on which one you want, if that's funner, just to mix things up again. Oh, yes, Ramia, Google Jamboard. If you want to use Jamboard, it's created by Google, is another online collaborative whiteboard, and it's free. In fact, my husband, they were doing a retrospective yesterday, and that's what they were using, and it was really cool. He put a little timeline in, like a happy, really, really happy face, a sad face, and said, okay, hover your cursor over how you're feeling about the last sprint. It was really cool. Oh, and clock soon. I haven't seen that one. Thank you, Maru. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the voting. Boom. For everybody. And now I can see, and oh, it looks like we have and then I would say, oh, 4, too many people in the meeting. No, that's so true. Like sometimes you just spam everybody. That's why we want to make sure in your agenda who needs to be there, who's optional. If they don't need to be there, don't waste their time. They could just, you could send them the notes afterward potentially. All right, so that's a good way, one tool to gain consensus. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we're going to go back to this. And then closing the meeting, right? A lot of times it's like, well, time's up, bye. Reserve some time at the end if you can to say, okay, here's what we did. Here's what we talked about. Here's what we agreed on. Is that correct? You have your notes in your agenda. You could potentially show them here like I'm doing, or maybe you just share your screen. And then, hey, what's our action plan? And then you distribute the notes and make sure you do follow up. So that's important as well. All right. Whew, how was that for good timing? We got 13 seconds left. What questions do we have or ideas that you want to share with the rest of us? Let's kind of open up the lines here. I'm going to remove the spotlight from my video. I'm going to switch to gallery view. Oh, there's even a beeper on there. All right. What questions do we have? Yes, Miro. Michael Baker, Miro, I use that as well. I've found, at least for new people who haven't used them, it's a little bit more complicated, but it just depends on your team. All right, what questions? Or ideas? Maybe I'll just turn this around a little bit. So what are some things that you've found help make a retrospective or a sprint planning meeting more effective? Or backlog refinement?
I have a question, not a suggestion. Is that okay?
Yes.
So what would you suggest maybe for someone that's going to facilitate the meeting, but is really, really bad about taking meeting notes? Should they just...
That's a good question. And it's, especially when it's online, it's hard to share your screen, take your notes, try to keep people engaged. What I do is I like to see if someone else would like to take the notes. That's a good question. Like picking, like, hey, having an extra responsibility gives that person even a more incentive to pay attention, right? And I've been like, hey, and who wants to do the screen sharing? If you can delegate some of that stuff, you're going to have greater collaboration. Plus, you're not going to go and saying trying to do 80 things at once.
Thank you. I was asking for a friend.
Yes. Okay. And I've got a question here from Sumash. How can the meetings be conducted with multiple small groups if we are unable to get all of them in one meeting and then get the data collected to make sense at the end? Ooh, that's a tricky one. That does happen where, hey, we cannot get everyone in the same online room ever. So a good thing kind of going along with the note taking is have the small groups meet, then you come up with those ideas or whatever, their decisions if it's a problem solving workshop. And then after that, you then would probably circle back. You could also have something that's either in like a Slack channel, say, here's what we come up with, and now let's finish the conversation within the two groups and combining those together. So think about, hey, maybe this doesn't require a meeting. We have those two separate meetings. Now we're going to use some online tools to come up with a final decision. So that's always the question. Hey, this could have been an email. You know, think about other ways to do that. Let's see, from Anne, what tools are you using for online Kanban? We use Jira, but not that user-friendly. Great question. I teach Kanban. In fact, I'm teaching a class tomorrow. My favorite is called Kanbanize as of the moment. Kanbanize, you can go and get that. I think it's about $15 a month. Lean Kit is also really good. Yeah, Jira, I've heard it's not the best. I have a lot of people use Microsoft Azure, DevOps Azure, which is okay, pretty limited though. Michelle, can you share some good on-screen digital clocks? We have someone that I have to meet with frequently that is notorious for going well over the scheduled time. That's fantastic. Yes. So Michelle, go to, no, I have to remember what it is. Online, was it, Brian knows this one because he taught this to me.
Online stopwatch. It's online dash stopwatch.
Online dash stopwatch. And there's all these fun little things you can use. What I've been doing, if you have Microsoft, it comes with a little stopwatch that you can just click on and type in timer and plop that up. That's what I use for my training. All right, let's see. So Ramya, okay, and Kanban. Yes, good point. And Michael Baker, Monday.com. I've heard really good things about Monday.com. I looked at it, I just haven't gone into detail. Thank you. Yes, Miro's cool. It has timers. You can play music in the background. It's kind of cool when they're doing some breakouts or if you're doing some brainstorming. Other questions. Rami, did you have a question? I see that your hand is raised.
Yeah, so for the Scrum meetings and work in an agile environment, we happen to have two very good BAs. One of them is actually senior. So I don't know if it's the best practice to have those BAs actually lead the meeting rather than the Scrum Master leading the meeting. I mean, they usually take notes. They really do a good job on keeping the agenda short and clean, but I'm not sure if they should be leading the meeting as in the housekeeping and everything. But I feel like they shouldn't actually be doing the points that we just discussed in this webinar about what the Scrum Master needs to do.
Well, I mean, there's no hard and fast rules as far as who facilitates. I'd like to have it be the Scrum Master because there's kind of the mediator in a lot of cases between the technical team and the business side. So sometimes if you have a business person doing the facilitation, things might tend to lean towards too much their perspective and maybe not being as collaborative. That's my opinion on that. So I think it might be better to have that neutral Scrum Master do that.
Okay.
But again, not absolute. Great question. Thank you. All right, other questions? Oh, I'm going to tell you my secret for questions. I learned this when I was in college and I was in education. When you ask a question, you wait for at least 7 seconds before you answer your own question. And I've noticed online, it's more like 10 for some reason. So I literally count one alligator. I ask a question. Does anyone have any questions? And then 1 alligator, 2 alligator, 3 alligator. I'm counting in my brain because I do not like uncomfortable silence. So I have to force myself to count. And then usually someone will say something within that 10 seconds. If they don't, it means I maybe need to rephrase the question, or maybe they just don't have any questions, and that's okay too. Just give them that space to do that. All right, so given that, now we have a couple minutes left. Any other questions or comments?
Is there a good way to handle multiple changes in a Scrum? In a 3-week time frame, I lost my PO, my lead programmer, and the client changed from a person that was invested to a person that didn't give a flying zucchini.
So that is very, very disturbing. That's hard. That's really hard when you're mixing up a team so often, because the whole thing of Scrum is, hey, we want these long-lived teams.
It was my first Scrum job.
Oh my goodness, that is so hard. And there's not a lot you can do if it's coming up from the top, except helping people understand that we want to build teams that are long lasting. So I work with a lot of groups who are kind of Scrummerful, if you will, and they have these projects where they intentionally, they change, people are coming and going every month. And it's really frustrating because they can't really get that camaraderie built. Maybe my suggestion I have for them is like, hey, here's kind of helping them ramp up quicker. Like, here's the rules of the road. Here's our team agreements. This is how we do things. This is how we work here, helping them at least jump in sooner and try to build those bonds quicker. But yeah, that's really frustrating. I wish I had a better answer.
I didn't come up with one.
Well, a lot of it's just helping the organization understand the value of these longer lived teams and what damage when we have someone who's unhappy and walks out the door. Oh my gosh, all that knowledge is gone. It is a huge cost. I always like to put everything in a cost perspective. Okay, it's going to take 6 months to wrap someone up there. Look how much money we wasted. Just got to make that a priority. It's important.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. All right, we've got just 2 more minutes. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Jill. Okay. Yes, a lot of people. Also mentioned this. Tammy just put our program practice is to begin meetings 5 minutes late. I had someone suggest that last week in one of my trainings. So then if you have back-to-back meetings, you have that little buffer. And then in that 5 minutes, for those of the people who come right on time, you could have some witty banter. You could have some little icebreakers built in to get things rolling, get things started.
We made the rule that a 1 hour meeting is actually a 50-minute meeting. They still seem to go on, but everybody is antsy. Oh, gotta go, gotta go. And that's worked out. Actually, it's worked out very well.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing. That sounds fantastic. Great. All right. Looks like we're up to the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been fantastic. If you please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have additional questions. I'm at jill.stott@nextstepsolutions.com, also on LinkedIn. Hope to see you again at one of our other webinars and or one of our training classes. So take care. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody, or evening if you're in India.
Thank you,
you,
Jill and
Jill.
Danny.
Thank you.